Story 1. Porky's. My parents dropped us off at the theater, and my brothers took me to Porky's instead of an age-appropriate movie for a 6-year-old. Story 2. My parents thought it was a good idea to have the movie Arachnophobia playing in the living room while the kids were home. I am absolutely terrified of spiders in real life to the point that I can't even be near dead ones. Story 3. It was not the scariest of movies, but my parents never allowed me to watch any horror films until I was around 13. I watched it when I was 7 or 8 with some older cousins. Surprisingly, I didn't develop a phobia of clowns, but I did develop fears of things I would see every day, like sewers and shower drains. I was convinced that at any moment, something could come out of a shower drain and pull me down into it. This is when I stopped taking baths. I would face the shower head and drain at all times while showering and open my shower curtains while using the restroom to make sure nothing was in there. Story 4. I was 6 when I saw Saving Private Ryan. I had no concept of life, death, or how movies were made. I took everything at face value. I asked my dad, "Dad, are they really killing these people to make a movie?" To which he replied, "We don't ask stupid questions around here." Now that I have a 7-year-old daughter, I understand my dad, but I would still never say something like that to her. Story 5. Girl, Interrupted. I was around 9 or 10 years old at the time, and I still can't handle that movie now at 33. There are only a few movies that I would never want to watch again, but that one is at the top of the list. I've never been left with such an unpleasant and unbearable feeling from a movie, and I'm a horror fan. Story 6. The Abyss. I assumed it was just a normal underwater movie with special effects as a kid. I didn't realize until I was in my 30s how insane and dangerous it was to shoot that movie in a massive underwater tank kept in darkness to simulate the ocean floor. The production caused significant mental and emotional damage to the cast and crew, and Ed Harris was nearly killed. There is no way a film could be shot practically like that today. Story 7. Howard the Duck scared me at 4. My babysitter's kid wanted to watch it. He was the same age as I was. Story 8. 13 Ghosts. Every time my neighborhood had a blackout, I couldn't move from one room to another, fearing the jackal would chase me. It scared me as a child, but it is one of the best horror movies I have seen. The backstories are excellent. Story 9. The Blair Witch Project was released when I was around 6 or 7 years old. We lived in the woods, and I was terrified to be outside by myself at night for years. I still feel a little uneasy when I'm outside alone at night. Story 10. The IT movie features a memorable shower scene where the character emerges from the drain, which traumatized me forever. I couldn't shower without closing my eyes for a long time. Story 11. The Entity. I am not sure how old I was, but I do not think I was much older than 10. This movie gave me nightmares for years. I have never watched it again, even now, a good 30 years later. Story 12. My parents took me to see Boys in the Hood when I was 13. Aside from the violence, it had a few sex scenes that made me uncomfortable. I honestly don't think they had any clue what the movie was about. Story 13. Psycho. My mom used to let me watch all the late-night movies with her. I had a lot of nightmares when I was a child. Story 14. Passion of the Christ. That movie was incredibly intense for a 13-year-old. I was haunted by it. My aunt wanted to take her children, who were no older than 7, to see it because her church encouraged her to, but I had to advise her against it. She only believed me after she went with her husband without the kids. Story 15. Stephen King's. I don't know how I was able to see it at around age 10, but I personally believe it caused me some psychological damage well into my teens. Story 16. One of my earliest memories is of my mom and dad in a shouting match because dad showed my sister and me The Thing when we were young. But then my mom went and showed us Alien like it was nothing. Story 17. I'm still not sure what it was. It was the early 1990s when my dad rented a horror science fiction type movie. It was similar to RoboCop, and I remember there was an advertisement for human organs and a threat of organ repossession. My mom made my dad return it. Story 18. 2 kids are with me, both around the age of 7 or 8. Born on the 4th of July, I watched the fireworks from behind the couch after sneaking into the living room. I should not have sneaked out of bed to rewatch Silent Night, Deadly Night on VHS before Dad took it back the next day. Story 19, The Shining. My grandmother's house had a long hallway, and I couldn't sleep there. I always thought about the scene with the blood gushing out of the elevator. Story 20. I must have been around 5 or 6 years old when my cousin, who was 10 years older than me, was babysitting. He had a couple of friends over and started watching a video cassette of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I had an epic meltdown, shut myself in the cupboard under the stairs, and refused to come out, even when my parents returned. Story 21. Twister. When I was 4, it was the only movie my parents had to show me when we moved and needed to keep me occupied. I wouldn't go outside alone for at least 6 months. Story 22. When I was 15 years old, an old friend's family decided to take me to see The Passion of the Christ for my birthday. My friend's parents were highly religious Christians. I haven't seen that movie since, nor will I ever see it again. Story 23. I was around 9 years old and had nightmares and flashbacks for weeks. I didn't stop thinking about it from time to time for years. Story 24. Clockwork Orange stands out, but there were others. Having had this experience as a child, I was careful with my children. However, without permission, my sitter let them watch Final Destination, and my sister allowed them to watch I Am Legend while they were still in elementary school. I had a fit. Story 25. I saw Stephen King's It when I was about 5. I made my mom stay in the bathroom while I took a shower, just in case the clown from the drain got me. I'm 35 and I still feel uneasy about drains, even though the scene in the movie has hilarious effects for 2025. Story 26. I watched Spirited Away when I was about 3 years old. My dad sat me down in front of the TV in his room while he went to drink with friends. The scene with No-Face vomiting and chasing the main character scared me for a long time. Story 27. I remember watching Hellraiser in my primary school uniform while eating cereal for breakfast. Story 28. I watched American Pie with my dad when I was 8 and the Poughkeepsie tapes through unmonitored internet access at 12. I also remember Faces of Death. I walked in on my mom watching it at 6, and I became interested when she let me watch the movie with her. Unfortunately, that led to harm obsessive-compulsive disorder. Story 29. Platoon. I couldn't sleep for weeks. The thought of Elias running for his life and nobody helping was haunting. Story 30. Night of the Living Dead. I was 5. Strangely enough, nearly 60 years later, I still love horror movies, especially zombie films. My husband says I'm very twisted. He enjoys romantic comedies. Story 31. Apparently, my dad raised me on horror movies while I was a baby. He would feed me in the middle of the night and watch horror movies on television. I don't remember this, but I do recall him letting my little brother and me watch 28 Days Later, when I was 11 and he was 9. My brother had nightmares for weeks afterward. I was totally fine, presumably from being desensitized as a baby. Story 32. My mom took me to see Apocalypse Now and Midnight Express when I was about 4 years old. I am now 51, but those movies had a significant impact on me. Story 33. I was getting ready to lose my last few baby teeth around 10 years old when Darkness Falls came out. It's a horror movie about the Tooth Fairy. If you see her when she comes to take your teeth, she kills you. My cousins think they are hilarious. Story 34. Species. My dad and uncle were watching it when I, a 6-year-old, wandered in. My dad was fine with introducing me to horror movies and some films with more suggestive themes, but that movie had a combination that was a bit too much for my young mind to process. Story 35. Woman in Black. We were shown it in school as a treat. I was 12 and couldn't sleep for days. I have always been sensitive to horror, but I doubt many 12-year-olds would enjoy that film. Story 36. I'm not sure what it was, but I believe this woman worked at a chemical plant, and I remember her boss trapping her in his office and assaulting her. I was around 10 when I saw that, and it really messed me up. I can't seem to remember the name of the movie or much else about it. Then there was House on Haunted Hill from 1999. I was around 7 for that one, and it terrified me. Honorable mention, Signs. The birthday party scene and when they are in the basement and the child has an asthma attack. So scary. Story 37. The Exorcist. My dad, in his infinite wisdom, turned it on and watched it with me. He said it was a great movie. It is a great movie, but not for a Catholic school fourth-grade girl. I didn't sleep for a week. On my own, I watched Apocalypse Now when I was 16. Again, a great movie, but the ending was so upsetting. Story 38. Revenge of the Nerds. I was probably 7 or 8 at the oldest. I was definitely still in elementary school, so I was under 10. The movie features some questionable consent that I didn't understand at the time. However, what struck me as too young was the portrayal of female bodies. Story 39. My grandparents were interesting free spirits. When I was a child, I would visit their house and play with my toy cars and Legos in the living room while they watched television. I never paid much attention to it because I was always focused on my toys. Story 40. I was 9 years old. It negatively impacted my mind, and I believe it contributed to hypersexuality when I reached puberty. Story 41. I really hope someone else knows this movie, Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters. I was watching this when I was around 3, 4, or 5. Story 42. I wouldn't say that I was too young. I just didn't care for it anyway. I had certainly seen worse on my own. My parents made a big deal about my sister not being able to watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show until she was old enough. However, when she finally saw it, I guess they just didn't care about me because I was chilling in the next room, casually looking over occasionally while being 3 years younger. Story 43. Brain Dead, also known as Dead Alive. I was 25, but that movie made me want to close my eyes and feel nauseous. It was terrible. Story 44. The Exorcist. I was 12. My brother got me into one of those old hometown movie theaters where no one checks identification. Story 45. I am Brazilian, and it is unfortunately common for children to be exposed to inappropriate content. Regarding my traumatic experience, I was young when I watched The Mighty. At that time, I believed all stories had happy endings, so I was devastated and cried a lot. Story 46. I had just turned 12 when my aunt took me to see Dark Shadows, the vampire movie starring Johnny Depp. Most of the jokes ruined my innocence, and the final battle, where the villain's skin was cracked and her head turned all the way around, really freaked me out. Story 47. Rumble in the Bronx. At age 7, I distinctly remember a man being fed into a wood chipper and later someone vomiting into the bag of what remained. Story 48. Hellraiser, the Amityville Horror, and The Thing. The first one I didn't understand when I was around 12. The second had an interesting story, but I was also too young to fully appreciate it. The last one remains in my heart to this day, and I rewatch it frequently, along with Alien and Terminator 2. Story 49. The Exorcist. My parents were good at not censoring too much while providing guidance. This scared me for 2 weeks. I was not raised in a religious household and did not believe in God or the devil, but the concept of being possessed by a demon was and still is terrifying. Story 50. Kingsman. I was in elementary school. What's funny, though, is that for the whole movie I was watching it, but at the end, my mother decided to cover my eyes because there was a sex scene, even though there were graphic scenes throughout the entire film. Story 51. I remember watching Toy Soldiers when I was very young. There was a scene where a toy went down the drain, and it made me afraid of bathtub drains for a while. Story 52. Batman Returns still traumatized me from the scene where he bites someone's fingers off. I have never watched another Batman movie and I still refuse. Story 53. The Ring. I was probably 6 years old. The scene with the bathtub made it so I couldn't enter a bathroom by myself for months. My mom was really tired of it. Story 54. Others can judge me on this, but I saw House of Wax at 13. You all tell me. I think it's a toss-up and could go either way. Story 55. The Sixth Sense. I was about 9 years old and not prepared. I had begged to see it for some reason, and when the ghost of the woman who had slit her wrists appeared, I screamed, causing the 2 adult men in front of me to jump out of their seats and throw popcorn everywhere. My mom took me next door to watch the end of Runaway Bride instead. Story 56. Apparently, Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland, scared me when I was about 5 years old, especially when the shadow monster eats the king. I had nightmares for a long time. Story 57. I watched Candyman and The Exorcist when I was 5 years old, while my parents were away. Needless to say, it frightened me, but it also sparked a lifelong love for the horror genre. Story 58. The Thing in a Motel 6 with my family on a road trip. I was around 6 years old. After my mom realized how bad it was, she made me duck under the covers so I couldn't watch, but they could still see it. However, I could continue to hear everything. Story 59. The old live-action Jesus movie from 1979 features a close-up of the nailing part of the crucifixion. It remained popular in Christian circles in the 1990s. Now, as an adult, I watch all sorts of horror movies, but that film scarred me for life. Anything with nails or something piercing up close makes me feel sick to my stomach. Story 60. Animal House. In 1978, my grandmother took several of us kids to the drive-in. Knowing nothing about what was playing, she thought it was a movie about animals. I was too young to understand what I was seeing, but a couple of my cousins were older and knew exactly what they were watching. Story 61. A Clockwork Orange. Probably around 10. I sneaked out of bed, and it was on Cinemax or HBO. It definitely resonated with me at the time, but I don't think I knew why. Story 62. Interview with the Vampire. That movie came out when I was a child, I think around 8 years old. I watched it one night on HBO with my older brother. It traumatized me for an entire summer and beyond. I literally couldn't sleep in my own bed for months. Story 63. It was a pre-feature movie at a film we went to see as a first-year school excursion. I was 12. In case anyone asks, no, I do not remember what the main feature was. Story 64. Candyman. I watched it with my dad at the age of 8 and was terrified to use the toilet for years. I still cannot go into a public restroom that looks like that. I haven't watched it since, but my mind can't forget. Story 65. Dead Calm. There was a very intense romantic scene with a young Nicole Kidman that was forever etched in my memory. Story 66. Final Destination 5 and My Bloody Valentine. Watching a scene with my dad was a little awkward. Story 67. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I was about 12 when my stepdad decided I needed to see this coming-of-age movie. He had clearly forgotten about a couple of scenes involving Phoebe Cates, Judge Reinhold, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Story 68. Hardball. I was too young to understand the story, and the death of the little child made me cry and gave me nightmares of shootings. Story 69. So I didn't see the whole movie, but my mom was watching Volcano when I was a kid, about 8 or 9. I walked into the room when the characters were trying to save people on the train. I remember when a guy jumped and landed in the lava. That haunted me for life. Story 70. I was about 7 or 8 years old with my mom at home when we rented a movie. The first part disturbed my sleep for a long time. I'm pretty sure that was around the time I started sleepwalking too. Story 71. 1975, The Giant Spider Invasion was a cheesy low-budget B-movie, but through my 8-year-old eyes, it was absolutely terrifying. Story 72. Motel Hill. I was about 4 years old. I don't even remember what the movie was about, just people with pig head masks and a chainsaw. Story 73. The chuckling and lack of concern I received from adults when I went around saying, "Very nice. How much?" Story 74. Several experiences stand out in my memory. I think the worst was the film from the mid-1970s that was shown in churches across America, depicting what it is like in hell. That was terrifying. I also went to the drive-in a lot with my older sisters and saw many horror movies in the late 1970s that still cause nightmares. The one that sticks in my mind was the first time I saw a fully nude woman on screen. I don't remember the name, but it involved a disturbed individual kidnapping women, hanging them from the ceiling, and using a flamethrower on them. That was not appropriate for a 10-year-old. Story 75. My mom forced me to watch it when I was around 6 or 7, so I transitioned from The Little Mermaid to Stephen King. Story 76. Insidious. My older sister, whom I love with all my heart, Decided to show my younger sister and me, aged 8 and 6 at the time, that movie while babysitting us. I didn't use the bathroom by myself at night until I was 14 because I was so scared of that demon hiding behind the shower curtain. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.